Hey, hey, welcome to a very special episode of Film Fanatics. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joseph.
We are just about on the 1-year anniversary of doing this show, Film Fanatics, and we had been tossing around a few different ideas of a minisode that we could do for the 1 year. But when we heard the news last week about Robin Williams passing at age 63, we thought the only thing we could do is devote this minisode to the films and performances of Robin Williams. So what we're going to do is basically we've all created our own individual top 10 best performances from Mr. Williams. And in addition to that, we have each a top 3 underrated or unknown or underappreciated performances that maybe didn't make our top 10, but that we think you should check out anyway. And for me, this news was just devastating. Robin Williams, one of my all-time favorites as a child. Joe, you I know posted a very, very sentimental video on your channel the night it happened, I believe, right? The night that America found out. We've all got Robin Williams memories from all these movies that we're going to talk about. And just a quick rundown. I mean, everyone knows how popular he was. 4 Oscar nominations, including 1 win. 4 Golden Globe Awards, 2 Emmys, 2 SAG Awards, and 5 Grammy Awards.
Wow.
The guy has an accomplished career, obviously, in comedy, film, and television for decades, and just a stunning, stunning loss. Joe, why don't we start with you, and let's hear 10 through 2 for your favorite Robin Williams performances.
All right. This was kind of a tough list to make because I think he does have a lot of good performances. I'd like to think these are roughly in order. Maybe not necessarily the best for all of them, but at least the best that I would like them. My number 10 is Henry Sagan from The Fisher King. This one kind of almost made my underrated list, but I feel like enough people know about it. It was kind of one of the first big performances to really get him out there known as a more diverse and serious actor. Also great Jeff Bridges, kind of coinciding with him there. 9 is Alan Parrish from Jumanji. This is a classic from my childhood. I think this one kind of is another one that showcases a little crazy side to Robin Williams, but also really heartfelt, a guy having a lot of fun, and just seeing him kind of get into the role and be very acrobatic and physical was different for him. Kind of showed rare action chops for him, actually, which it's kind of one of the few I guess you could see in that movie.
Yeah, that is true. Really, I haven't seen that one in a long time.
But yeah, there's a lot of action stunts in that there, and great effects too. A fun movie. Number 8 is John Keating from Dead Poet Society. You can't make a top 10 list without this one, I think. Just a really great role for him. Great speeches, monologues, just a great character in general. Kind of really inspiring about poetry and literature in general, so speaks to my heart truly. Though I do think in that movie, a lot of the younger actors are kind of the focus. Robin Williams is kind of off to the side, but his character is so important, and he does such a good job with the performance. Number 7 is Peter Banning / Peter Pan from Hook. This is kind of a big one for my childhood. Once again, seeing Robin Williams kind of in this role, just having a lot of fun and kind of working with kids a lot more than most other films. I thought he did a great job with that, and also a little more action for him too.
Yeah, that's true.
And had some really great dialogue exchange and comedic timing with Dustin Hoffman, one of my favorites.
And Julia Roberts.
And a lot of other great people, actually. Just overall, really good performance from him, really enjoyable movie. Number 6 is Andrew Martin from Bicentennial Man. I know this one's a little divisive for some people, but no matter what you think of the movie, I think his performance is still really good in it. I mean, just showing this robot who kind of has trouble dealing with human emotions and actually slowly gaining emotion is actually one of his more powerful performances. And
it's not one I've seen.
One of the few sci-fi movies he's actually done before, and actually not bad. Kind of a loose adaptation of Asimov, once again. We have Armand Goldman from The Birdcage. Just a classic character. Once again, kind of playing more of a straight man rather than an overly comedic one against Nathan Lane. So see some more of the diversity there with his role. But another great movie, classic. I actually got to see it completely for the first time recently. So I was glad I saw that for this list. Adrian Cronauer from Good Morning Vietnam. Probably the first really big movie to kind of get him in popularity, get that first Oscar nod. Really one of those roles that just shows how easily he can slice between the great comedy and once again a lot of great improv A lot of the lines of that movie were improvised, but he also could hold a lot of seriously dramatic moments with the nature of war, and he really was able to kind of capture a very complicated character, very realistic. Number 3, of course, is the Genie from Aladdin. One of his best roles, definitely one of the best in terms of voice acting, one of the few he did, but he made this character for a lot of people. He made Aladdin, a big part of one of the reasons it was one of the most popular Disney films of the 90s and of all time, so has to at least be acknowledged. Great performance, great character. And my number 2 is Seymour Parrish from 1 Hour Photo. This one is actually probably the most complicated character he's ever played. Actually not comedic at all, very dark, very serious, but not necessarily evil. That's reserved for another character in another list. But still really good performance, easily one of my favorites. Might have been number 1, but if you haven't seen it, still recommend it. There is still one more that's, I think, a little better, though.
And I would say, I think you've mentioned this on the show before, you actually prefer the dramatic Williams to the comedic.
You'll see in, actually the other ones I'm probably going to list later, I generally prefer Robin Williams' dramatic performances more, but as I looked over the lists of his performances and the ones I liked, I think it's pretty even. Yes, I would say I prefer the dramatic ones, but I think he was very good at both.
Okay, and that's certainly a fair statement. Well, my top 10 actually also starts out with Harry Sagan from The Fisher King. This gave him a Golden Globe win and an Oscar nomination. I think the movie on the whole is a little bit uneven, but the story surrounding Williams and Amanda Plummer, I think, is the strongest part. And the other thing that always struck me about that movie is there's a scene, like in the middle, where he goes full frontal nudity for a couple minutes, and you see everything a few times. And the idea that a A-list actor at the top of his game would do that, I mean, it would be like Brad Pitt doing it in a movie today. It just blows my mind that he was that open enough and comfortable enough as an actor to just go for it and do that, and I have always respected that. My number 9 is Lance Clayton in World's Greatest Dad. Really an underrated movie. This was the first movie really in a while that Robin Williams did that I thought was really good. I believe it was 2009 it came out. And it's so sad now to think about it, because in the film his son dies from autoerotic asphyxiation, and his father, played by Robin Williams, tells everybody it's a suicide to gain sympathy, and so it's it's sort of heart-wrenching to think about it in the context now, but it's a really good movie and a very strong performance, and again, a good mix of comedy and drama from him.
I would argue more drama, though.
I would say it's definitely more drama, but he does get his
laughs,
patented Robin Williams, shtick in there a little bit. Number 8 for me is T.S. Garp from The World According to Garp. What I really loved about not only the performance, but just the movie on the whole, is it was the first time that anybody had really seen a more dramatic side of Williams. It was his first major movie after Popeye, which certainly was not of the dramatic vein. And, Mork and Mindy, the TV show, was obviously very silly and comedic, which, if we were doing TV shows on the list, Mork would certainly be in my top 10 for that. But obviously this is a comedic role, but it's got a lot of drama to it. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I think it's interesting that John Lithgow and Glenn Close were nominated for this movie for Oscars in supporting roles, and he was not, because I think the Academy didn't see him as a viable actor yet. They saw him as Popeye and Mork, and maybe didn't know what to do with that. And I think that's a shame, because it's a great performance. My number 7 is the Genie from Aladdin. I haven't seen this movie in a while, but obviously, growing up, it was a staple. This really sort of ushered in the era of the big voices in movies. Shortly after this, you had
Klein, Gibson,
Moore. The Lion King, Toy Story with Tim Allen and Tom Hanks. Going back before Aladdin, you didn't really see, again, these A-listers doing that sort of thing. So that was cool. My number 6 is Theodore Roosevelt from Night at the Museum and its sequel, and soon-to-be third one. It's a very interesting performance because he is pretty serious in it, but it's kind of like the whole heart of the film. The story with him and Sacagawea, trying to get with her. is the entire like heart and soul of the film, with the comedy happening around him. So I've always liked that performance. My number 5, much like Joe, is Armin Goldman from The Birdcage. We talked about this on our full-length show just a few weeks ago. Just a great performance from him, so I don't have to go into too much detail with that. Number 4 is John Keating from Dead Poets Society, one of his Oscar nominations there. And you're absolutely right. It's more a movie about the kids, about Ethan Hawke and Josh Charles and the other guys. But when he's not on the screen, the movie suffers. It dips in quality, and I think that speaks to how strong the performance and the character are. My number 3 is Sean Maguire from Good Will Hunting, his one and only Oscar win in the supporting category for this. Really just a solid movie all the way through, and this character is, for me, his finest of the dramatic performances. And my number 2 is Adrian Kroner from Good Morning Vietnam. For me, maybe it hits a little more home with my radio background, but I just think it's so fascinating that, like you said, Joe, all of the broadcast portions of that movie are him ad-libbing. And that is just so incredible, and you wonder how much was left on the cutting room floor, how many different takes they did, and how many different, great bits that he had in him, because it was just pouring out of him. And it's just a fantastic performance, and he does do a lot of great drama, like you said, as well, in there. Justin, let's hear from you on the top 10.
All right, kicking it off with number 10 is Andrew Martin, Bicentennial Man. Sci-fi films dealing with robots often deal with the struggle of humanity, and Williams, along with the narrative as a whole, run with that and never look back. Instead of envying or hating humans, Williams' character simply just wants to become one and convincing others about the natural component of it. My number 9 is Henry Sagan, the Fisher King. Probably the strangest role Williams has ever taken on, but if there's anybody that could guide him through the world of the strange, it's gotta be director Terry Gilliam. His character starts out a little bit cartoonish, but we gradually start to see why and how he got that way, with great emotional intensity. And it's a performance only complemented by Gilliam's symbolism that he puts throughout the film that honestly begs it to be explored even further, and I can honestly see it getting better on repeat viewings. My number 8 is Walter Finch, Insomnia. I think this was really the start of the darker, more serious roles from Williams that I'm not quite sure people were really sure how to feel about. Obviously, we knew him from Mrs. Doubtfire and all these other kind of like fun, upbeat movies, but this was a big change of pace. But I thought his performance as the antagonist of the film really complemented this psychological component that's imperative to this mystery thriller. And I really feel it manages to go above and beyond the source material from 1997, largely with the help of Christopher Nolan. My number 7 is Armand Goldman, The Birdcage. There's no denying that Robin Williams knows comedy, but this honestly showcases how much variety he has in the matter. He plays a gay man in a ridiculous scenario, but he plays it with so much conviction that it never feels cartoonish or even offensive for that matter. My number 6 is Daniel Hillard, or more commonly known as Mrs. Doubtfire. Honestly showcases the one aspect of Williams that I feel like I'll honestly miss the most. His warmth. Whether it's a loving father or wacky nanny, the audience can never deny how much love Williams brings into this character, and it just flows throughout the entire movie. And the final monologue that he delivers at the end of the film, I will happily argue, is one of the most touching scenes I've ever seen in a family film. My number 5 is Seymour Cy Parrish in 1 Hour Photo. I think this is Williams' darkest and gutsiest performance. His character is creepy but also very haunted, and we get to learn more about this as the film goes on in these kind of subtle ways. And it starts to beg the question by the end of it whether or not Cy is a villain or a victim. And I'm honestly still debating that years after I've seen it. Number 4 is Adrian Cronauer, Good Morning Vietnam. It's a great story about a man assigned to bring humor to a scenario that can only be defined as hell on earth through something as seemingly simple as the radio. He starts out seemingly only caring about having a good time, but we slowly start to see how much the war has influenced his actions, and his job for that matter. My number 3 is the Genie from Aladdin. I feel like you can watch this movie over and over again, and you'll still find a joke you may have missed from a prior viewing. And if nothing else, we ain't never had a friend like him. My number 2 is John Keating, Dead Poet Society. I feel like this is easily Williams' most iconic and quotable dramatic role. He teaches the kids important lessons about embracing art, but not to let it overcome them either. And if I could stand on a desk and shout, "Oh, Captain, my Captain," as we record this, believe me, I would.
Yeah, it's a great role for sure. Mm-hmm. Very heartfelt at the end there.
Very quotable.
And yes. It is very quotable. You're right. I would say of the dramatic, you're right. That's certainly his most quotable. Like I thought we would have obviously a lot of similar things in our top 10, so I thought we would do the top 3 underrated performances to get a few more in the mix. So Joe, let's hear from you on the top 3 favorite underrated performances from Mr. Williams.
Well, 2 notes on this. I was going by the most underrated, obviously. So, to be fair, these 3 movies probably, and quite possibly in this order, would actually be my top 3 favorite films. But since I was separating them as specifically underrated, these are the most underrated.
Sure.
Number 3 is Walter Finch from Insomnia. I think this is an incredibly dark performance from him. A little more straightforward, perhaps, than Psy from 1 Hour Photo, but really good antagonist. Probably the first clear antagonist he really ever plays. Really good with Al Pacino. Very creepy, very haunting. Great performance from him. Number 2 is Dr. Malcolm Sayer from Awakenings. This is probably one of his most underrated performances, though in some circles he has gotten a lot of acknowledgement for it. Really, really subtle character. It plays a lot without really overreacting. It's dramatic, but it's kind of quiet. And it's just a really powerful story, and I think his character is a really good anchor for that. And we'll be watching that soon.
Yeah, I have not seen that one, but we'll be watching it for the Oscars A to Z within the next year.
I think it's one of his best movies.
Great.
And De Niro's, too. And my number 1, underrated, and probably my favorite one, actually, would be Lance Clayton from World's Greatest Dad. The only reason I put this one above Awakenings is because I discovered it. I thought it was a great movie and a fantastic performance from him, but no one ever talks about this movie.
No. It flew so far under the radar. I mean, it was barely released in theaters.
Like, I knew one time at work, just one girl I was working with in passing said, "Hey, have you seen this movie, World's Greatest Dad? It's a good Robin Williams movie." I'm like, I never even heard of it. And I checked it out. It was on Netflix, and I'm like, wow. And then I watched it again, and I showed some other people it. It was a really, really great movie.
I happened to hear an interview on the radio with Bobcat Goldthwait from the Police Academy movies, who directed the movie. And he was talking about it, and I thought, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. I haven't seen Williams in a couple years. And like yourself, I checked it out on Netflix, and it was great.
And the thing is, for me, there was a period of time like that I didn't see many Robin Williams movies. There's kind of a gap for me. After 1 Hour Photo, I don't think I saw any of those movies like RV or anything like that. But then I just discovered this one. I thought, wow, this is a great performance. He's kind of come back.
Yeah.
And so that's the one that sticks most fresh in my mind. And the few people that have seen it love it, but just not a lot of people have seen it.
Yeah, this definitely. If you've never seen it, give that one a watch for sure. Well, my number 3 is Tom Dobbs from Man of the Year. This is not a great movie. I probably would give it like in the C range.
Same.
But his performance is fantastic. The problem with the movie was it didn't quite know what it wanted to be. But Williams plays this fantastic comedian turned politician. He's like a Bill Maher, Jon Stewart type. And they sort of jokingly run him for office, and then it becomes a serious run for office, and then some other things happen. But he nails that sort of biting political satire kind of role, which, I mean, you can imagine if Williams did have his own talk show or whatever, he would be fantastic. So pretty easy to imagine that. My number 2 is Dwight D. Eisenhower from The Butler. It's not a huge role, as none of the presidents in that movie are, but as we talked about that movie early on in the Film Fanatics history, there's a lot of really great presidential performances in it, and this is one of them. And I think because a lot of people, were happy with the Teddy Roosevelt that he did in Night at the Museum, why would he go back to the presidential well and do a different president? And he nails this one too. So I thought that was a good number 2. And my number 1 is Maxwell Wallace from August Rush. Have either of you seen this movie?
No.
It's incredibly good. Justin, you're always looking for the family film. This is a great family film. It's Freddie Highmore as this just child prodigy, and through some circumstances, Freddie Highmore finds himself in this sort of abandoned warehouse that Robin Williams lives in, and he is also a music prodigy that became homeless, and he takes in all these kids, and it's a supporting role. He's only in maybe, 20 minutes of the movie, but he's extremely integral to the plot and Freddie Highmore character's growth. And there's also a question of, is he a good guy or a bad guy? So it's just a very, very interesting role for him. And that was in that same period where, like, RV, I think it was out in 2006 or 7, where it was like he wasn't cranking out the hits, but he did a lot of these really cool
under-the-radar kind of
movies, yeah. Justin?
Well, I guess I really need to see World's Greatest Dad now.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It's a great movie.
It's highly recommended.
All right, kicking it off at number 3 is Peter Banning from Hook. While just about everyone involved with this film has issues with it, including Spielberg, I personally found this really, really underrated. Exploring the concept of Peter Pan growing up is put in the very capable hands of Robin Williams, who adds depth without it becoming a bloated cartoon. And the overall transition to becoming the boy he once was may be a bit overlong, but the charisma and reluctance from Williams' character keeps an epic family film fun and exciting.
It is interesting you say that as underrated, though, because adults, I think, are more torn on it, but, Joe has very fond childhood. I think if you were a kid when that movie came out, you have very,
awesome.
very fond memories of it, yeah.
When I was talking to people about Robin Williams' death, the things people would say automatically, oh, no, I mean things from my childhood, Aladdin and Hook. Like a bunch of people kept saying,
Aladdin, Hook, and Doubtfire are like the main three, I think,
those
from
three, like,
childhoods.
if you were a kid in the early 90s,
in our age group,
it would be like, yeah, people, kids love it. People that grow up with it love it.
Yeah.
Even though you're right, the movie does have problems, but his performance is great.
Number 2 is Dr. Cozy Carlyle from Dead Again. I think it's a very brief but a very memorable performance. He plays this jaded doctor with spotty ethics, but he offers up these concepts to Kenneth Branagh's character that resonate well after he's gone. And my only real regret is I wish he had a bigger part, because I wanted to see so much more of him once he got introduced.
That's a really good movie.
Absolutely.
We've brought that up once on the show before. I forget for what.
I believe it was for Murder Mysteries.
It might have been. And, I mean, I haven't seen it in 20 years. I didn't even know Robin Williams was in it. I didn't remember that until I looked up his filmography. But, yeah, that is a really good movie.
And my number 1 is Chris Nielsen, What Dreams May Come. It's one of the most unique and clever outlooks on life after death I've ever seen. The way he plays a father dealing with loss is nothing short of heartbreaking, but yet it still retains this positive message that even in death, love never truly fades away.
You'll be happy to know that was actually my number 11. That's
wow.
a really good performance.
That does not get enough credit.
It doesn't, but you know what? People do still talk about that movie.
People like that movie.
But it isn't one that has been seen by a ton of people, but the people that have seen it really do like it.
Personally, I think that it was a good performance from him. I think the thing that elevates that movie is just the production design.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And a great Cuba Gooding Jr. too.
Yes.
Once again.
But yeah, just the vivid colors and everything.
The story is cool. I
Yeah.
always thought his performance was good, but I think that's not why people remember the movie.
Well, what is your number 1 of the greatest Robin Williams performances, Joe?
I mean, it's kind of a go-to. It's Sean Maguire from Good Will Hunting. This is probably his best dramatic performance. Some of his scenes in this movie are so powerful, and he plays it with ultimate conviction. But even some of the humor he slides in is not his typical humor. It's actually more genuine. It's more contextual.
I would agree with that.
But also, most of it was ad-libbed as well.
Mm.
Even the stuff you'd think would be...
That I didn't know.
Yes, some of the little jokes he made up in conversations with Matt Damon's character were things he made up that he thought would relate to the situation. So I thought that was cool how he was able to add so much depth to that character in a dramatic performance, once again using humor. And the story is great. The film is excellent. One of Matt Damon's best. And just the entertainment between him is probably one of the best, like, mentor-youth reactions I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
Just easily deserving of the Oscar, and probably one of his best. My personal favorite, I don't know, but it's definitely up there. It's a fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's just a great performance.
And, you'll sort of notice a bit of a theme with these lists, is that he excels in these mentor, teacher kind of roles.
Mm-hmm.
I think it really speaks to the kind of person that he was, because not everybody can pull off a good teacher role, you know, or especially something like this where it's like it starts out very volatile and, you know, sort of segues into something more manageable. But my number one is Daniel Hillard / Mrs. Doubtfire. I had to put it up top. It's in my top 25 movies of all time. You know, it's one I could watch again and again. And we used to have a tradition in my family where we would go to the movies on Christmas Eve. And this was the last one that we got to do as a family because everybody was kind of getting older and growing up. And so I have a lot of, you know, good memories from that. And just what an absolutely great performance. Both the comedic and Justin mentioned the very heartfelt scene towards the end in the courtroom. I've probably seen that movie 20 times, and I still tear up.
Would have probably put it up there, but I haven't seen it in years.
Yeah, if it's been a while. You know, it was hard for me to put Hook on the list.
Good movie.
Yeah.
This is true. My number one, much like Joe, is also Sean Maguire, Good Will Hunting. When I first saw this I thought it was a good performance, but it never quite blew me away. But as the movie's kind of sat with me over the years, the more I've really come to appreciate his role in the movie. He just plays a character with so many layers that absolutely show off the film's polished writing. The banter and emotional intensity that he brings to it with the interplay with Damon's character is just so good and adds so much energy to it that I really do believe that that's the central reason that I think Hollywood is truly lesser for Williams' loss.
Great number one, and really, I mean, good list all around. There's many, many movies that if you have not seen yet, you know, definitely check them out. We've mentioned some under the radar ones and maybe some popular ones that people have not seen. Patch Adams is another good one.
I always like.
I had considered that.
I consider Patch Adams too. I actually really like Patch Adams, but there are issues with the movie that prevented me from putting it up there.
And I would say his performance in Patch Adams is not that dissimilar to some of the movies we've listed.
Some people would call it the generic Williams performance.
Right. That's a good descriptor.
But is it necessarily generic or just what people have become used to?
That's what's you, because that's one reason why, because of films like Patch Adams and Bicentennial Man, critics were kind of giving him a hard time, which has hence led to Insomnia and 1 Hour Photo back to back. So he can do whatever he wants. So he could do whatever he wants.
That is true.
I mean, take that criticism. I mean, take that point with a grain of salt. I've never seen Patch Adams.
You never have?
I never have.
It's not great, but he's good in it.
It's a good performance. Just it's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, that's true. But also some really great stand-up. If you've never seen him do a stand-up routine or one of his HBO specials, you can get several of them on DVD and possibly on Netflix Instant. I know they have a lot of comedy specials there as well.
Whose line is it anyway?
Yeah, good improv. He was always a great improver. I mean, we
made his career
so
off
many
it.
of these movies. Yeah, well, and just, you know, hosting Comic Relief all those years, and he was adept at that, and his mind just worked like nobody else's. And it was even evident. The show was not great, but the Crazy Ones that was on last year with him and Sarah Michelle Gellar, you know, just you could tell that most of the you know, witty retorts and the snappy dialogue from his end were ad-libbed. So yeah, definitely a huge loss for just everybody.
Indeed.
You know, but that is the Minisode. Thanks so much for listening. We would love to hear your thoughts on your favorite Williams movies or performances. You can do that in the comment section here on the video, and you can feel free to subscribe to Film Fanatics here on YouTube if you have not done so. We'll be back in just a few days with a full show for you, but for now, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.